There is a strange feeling that almost everyone experiences at least once in their life. You suddenly think about someone you haven't seen in years. Seconds later, your phone rings. It's them. You walk into a crowded room and instantly feel anxious, even though nothing has happened. You stand next to a complete stranger on a train, and somehow you know they're carrying something heavy inside them. Not because they said anything. Not because you saw anything. You simply felt it. Most people dismiss these moments as coincidence. Psychologists call them intuition. Mystics call them energetic resonance. Scientists often call them cognitive bias. But what if every one of those explanations is only describing one small piece of something much larger? What if the human mind was never designed to exist in complete isolation? What if consciousness behaves less like thousands of separate islands, and more like one enormous ocean, where each individual mind is simply a wave rising for a brief moment before disappearing back into the whole? For centuries, philosophers have asked a question that refuses to disappear. Where do thoughts actually come from? When a new idea suddenly appears in your mind, did you create it? Or did you receive it? This question sounds philosophical. Until modern neuroscience, quantum theory, and analytical psychology begin asking surprisingly similar questions from completely different directions. Carl Jung believed that beneath our personal memories exists something far older. Something deeper. A psychological layer shared by every human being who has ever lived. He called it the collective unconscious. Not a metaphor. Not poetry. A real psychological structure existing underneath individual identity. According to Jung, every fear, every myth, every symbol, every recurring dream was connected through this invisible reservoir. Different civilizations, separated by oceans, created nearly identical myths without ever meeting each other. Ancient Egypt, ancient China, Native American tribes, Norse mythology, Hindu philosophy. Thousands of years apart. Yet they described the same cosmic flood. The same wise old man. The same shadow. The same hero. The same death and rebirth. How could that happen? Were humans simply telling similar stories? Or were they remembering something deeper than history itself? Jung believed these archetypes were not invented. They emerged naturally. Because every human mind grows from the same invisible psychological roots. Imagine thousands of trees standing across an enormous forest. Above the ground. Each tree appears completely separate. Different branches. Different leaves. Different shapes. But beneath the soil, their roots begin touching. Eventually, they become impossible to separate. From above, many trees. Below, one living network. Perhaps consciousness works the same way. Perhaps individuality is only visible on the surface. And beneath it, something ancient quietly connects us all. Modern neuroscience unexpectedly offers another fascinating clue. Inside your brain are specialized cells called mirror neurons. These neurons activate not only when you perform an action, but also when you simply watch someone else perform it. If you see someone smile, parts of your brain smile too. If you watch someone cry, your own emotional circuitry begins reacting before you've consciously processed what you're seeing. This explains empathy. Or at least, part of it. But empathy itself opens another mystery. Why do some emotions spread through crowds almost instantly? Why does panic move faster than words? Why does laughter become contagious? Why does one frightened person suddenly make hundreds afraid? Even before anyone understands why. Your brain seems designed not merely to think, but to synchronize. Synchronization exists everywhere in nature. Fireflies begin flashing together. Birds suddenly change direction as one body. Schools of fish move like liquid intelligence. Entire forests communicate through underground fungal networks, warning neighboring trees of danger long before insects arrive. Nature repeatedly chooses connection over isolation. So why would humans, the most socially complex species on Earth, be the only exception? Maybe we aren't. Maybe we've simply forgotten how connected we already are. Now imagine extending this idea beyond biology. Imagine thoughts behaving similarly. Ideas spreading without words. Emotions moving across invisible pathways. Entire societies unconsciously synchronizing. History contains astonishing examples. Sometimes, multiple inventors create nearly identical discoveries at exactly the same time, without knowing one another. Isaac Newton and Gottfried Leibniz independently developed calculus. Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace both formulated natural selection. Alexander Graham Bell and Elisha Gray filed patents for the telephone on the very same day. Coincidence? Perhaps. But historians call this phenomenon multiple discovery. It's surprisingly common. Why do breakthrough ideas seem to emerge simultaneously in different minds? Maybe because knowledge evolves naturally. Or perhaps certain ideas become available once humanity reaches a specific level of readiness. As though civilization itself is learning. The French philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin imagined something extraordinary. He proposed that humanity might eventually develop a global layer of consciousness surrounding the Earth. He called it the noosphere. Not made from rocks. Not made from air. But made from thought itself. Today, the internet physically connects billions of minds. But Teilhard imagined something deeper. A connection that existed long before technology. A field where ideas, symbols, dreams, and intuitions continuously circulate. At first glance, this sounds mystical. Yet every day, social scientists observe remarkably similar phenomena. Emotional contagion. Behavioral synchronization. Mass psychological shifts. Collective memory. Social resonance. The vocabulary changes. The mystery remains. Then there is another strange observation. Sometimes entire populations begin feeling anxious, without immediately knowing why. Financial markets panic. Communities become restless. Fear spreads. Hours later, major news breaks. Of course, humans constantly detect subtle environmental signals without conscious awareness. Body language, tone, facial expressions, changes in routine. Our brains assemble tiny clues long before our conscious mind notices them. But some researchers wonder whether something else might also contribute, not supernatural, not magical. Simply another layer of communication science has yet to fully understand. This brings us to one of the most controversial questions in consciousness research. What if thoughts themselves possess properties we've barely begun exploring? Not telepathy in the science fiction sense. Not mind reading. But influence. Resonance. Synchronization. Fields. Patterns. After all, every thought corresponds with measurable electrical activity inside the brain. Every emotion creates measurable physiological changes. Every heartbeat generates an electromagnetic field extending beyond the body. Your nervous system constantly broadcasts information. So does everyone else's. The question isn't whether human beings emit signals that we clearly do. The deeper question is, how many of those signals are actually being received? And perhaps an even more unsettling question follows. How many of your thoughts were never entirely yours to begin with? Imagine for a moment that every human mind is like a radio. Not a radio that only broadcasts, but one that constantly receives. Most of the time, the signal is buried beneath noise. The endless stream of internal dialogue. Notifications. Responsibilities. Memories. Plans. Fear. Desire. The modern mind is rarely quiet enough to notice anything beyond itself. But every so often, something slips through. A thought arrives that feels strangely complete. A feeling appears without an obvious source. A sudden certainty settles into your mind, even though no logical evidence supports it. Was it intuition? Coincidence? Or did your mind briefly tune into something larger than itself? This question has fascinated philosophers, neuroscientists, and physicists for decades. None of these fields has reached the same conclusion, but together they reveal a pattern that is difficult to ignore. One of the most fascinating ideas comes from quantum physics. Quantum entanglement describes a phenomenon in which two particles that have interacted can exhibit correlations that remain linked even when separated by great distances. Measuring one particle is statistically related to the state of the other in ways that cannot be explained by ordinary classical intuition. Albert Einstein famously referred to this as spooky action at a distance. It sounded impossible. Yet experiment after experiment confirmed that entanglement is a real feature of quantum systems. What remains uncertain is whether this phenomenon has anything to do with human consciousness. Many books and documentaries suggest that it does. The truth is more complicated. There is currently no scientific evidence showing that human thoughts become quantum entangled in the same way subatomic particles do. But the metaphor continues to inspire an intriguing question. If nature allows profound forms of connection at its smallest scales, could consciousness possess forms of connection we have not yet learned how to measure? History reminds us that science has repeatedly discovered invisible forces only after developing the tools capable of detecting them. There was a time when bacteria were unknown. Radio waves were unimaginable. Electricity seemed almost magical. Gravity itself remained mysterious long before mathematics described its behavior. Reality often contains more than our instruments can currently perceive. Perhaps consciousness deserves the same humility. Meanwhile, psychology offers another perspective. Human beings constantly synchronize without realizing it. Researchers have observed that close friends unconsciously mirror one another's posture. Couples often begin breathing at similar rhythms during deep conversations. People walking together gradually match their pace. Even heart rates can become more closely aligned during moments of emotional connection. Synchronization appears to be one of the brain's default behaviors. It creates trust, safety, belonging, and perhaps something deeper. Have you ever noticed how entering a peaceful room instantly calms your mind? Or how walking into an argument makes your body tense before anyone speaks? Your nervous system is remarkably sensitive. It continuously gathers information beyond conscious awareness. Tiny facial movements, changes in breathing, muscle tension, tone of voice, micro-expressions lasting fractions of a second. These signals combine into an emotional impression long before logic catches up. What we often call intuition may sometimes be the extraordinary speed of unconscious perception. Yet not every experience fits neatly into that explanation. Many people describe moments when they sensed the emotional state of someone who was physically far away. A parent suddenly waking in the middle of the night moments before receiving difficult news. Identical twins reporting similar emotional experiences despite living on opposite sides of the world. Friends thinking about each other at exactly the same moment before either reaches out. These stories are fascinating. They are also anecdotal. Science treats anecdotes with caution because personal experiences, however meaningful, cannot by themselves establish causation. Still, the consistency of such stories across cultures keeps the question alive. Perhaps there is nothing unusual happening. Or perhaps we simply lack a complete explanation. This curiosity inspired researchers at Princeton University to begin one of the most unusual long-term experiments ever conducted. It became known as the Global Consciousness Project. The premise was surprisingly simple. Around the world, researchers placed devices called random number generators. These machines continuously produced unpredictable sequences of numbers. Under normal conditions, their outputs behaved exactly as statistics predicted. Random. Chaotic. Unrelated. But the researchers wondered whether moments of intense shared human attention might subtly influence these systems. Major global events were selected for observation. New Year's celebrations. International tragedies. Historic announcements. Events watched simultaneously by millions of people. The results became the subject of intense discussion. According to the project, during some globally significant events, patterns appeared that deviated slightly from what pure randomness would predict. Supporters suggested that collective human attention might somehow correlate with these statistical changes. Critics argued that the results could arise from methodological issues, selective analysis, or ordinary statistical fluctuation. To this day, the debate remains unresolved. The project did not prove that consciousness changes physical reality. Nor did it completely dismiss the possibility that something unusual deserves further investigation. Perhaps the greatest value of the experiment lies elsewhere. It asked a question most scientists never thought to ask. Could billions of minds focusing together create measurable patterns? Even asking such a question expands the boundaries of inquiry. Whether the answer is yes or no, curiosity itself moves knowledge forward. Another idea frequently appears whenever collective consciousness is discussed. The Hundredth Monkey phenomenon. According to the popular story, researchers observed Japanese monkeys learning to wash sweet potatoes. Eventually, once enough monkeys adopted the behavior, supposedly monkeys on distant islands began doing the same without direct contact. It is an extraordinary story. Unfortunately, the evidence supporting the popular version is weak. Many historians and scientists argue that the phenomenon was later exaggerated and transformed into a modern myth. Yet the metaphor survives because it expresses something people intuitively recognize. Ideas spread. Not only through conversation, but through culture, imitation, observation, shared environments. The exact mechanism may differ from the legend, but collective learning is undeniably real. Language evolves. Fashion changes. Technological revolutions emerge. Entire generations begin thinking differently within remarkably short periods of time. Humanity appears capable of reorganizing itself with astonishing speed once enough individuals adopt a new perspective. Culture behaves almost like a living organism. Each individual contributes something small. Together, those contributions reshape civilization itself. Perhaps this is what Carl Jung was pointing toward. Not literal psychic communication, but an invisible architecture of symbols and meaning shared across humanity. When one person creates something genuinely original, they rarely create it from nothing. They build upon countless ideas inherited from teachers, books, ancestors, strangers, and cultures stretching back thousands of years. Every thought carries echoes of other minds. Perhaps individuality has always been more collaborative than we realize. Then consider another mystery. Have you ever noticed that entire societies sometimes seem to dream the same dream? A new philosophy suddenly appears. An artistic movement emerges almost overnight. Scientific revolutions unfold across continents. The Renaissance. The Enlightenment. The digital age. No single person created these transformations. Millions of minds gradually synchronized around new ways of seeing reality. It is tempting to imagine history being driven only by extraordinary individuals. But perhaps extraordinary individuals simply become the visible expression of changes already unfolding beneath the surface of collective consciousness. Like waves rising from an unseen ocean. The question then becomes deeply personal. If human consciousness is influenced by the emotional atmosphere surrounding it, what kind of atmosphere are you living inside every day? Fear spreads. Hope spreads. Anger spreads. Compassion spreads. Attention is contagious. Belief is contagious. Meaning itself may be contagious. The information you consume, the conversations you repeat. The emotions you reinforce. They do not end with you, they ripple outward through families, friendships, communities, and eventually into cultures. Whether consciousness is connected through mysterious fields or simply through the remarkable architecture of human psychology, one truth remains remarkably clear. No mind exists in complete isolation. Every thought changes the thinker. And every transformed thinker quietly changes the world around them. But there is still one final question. Perhaps the most important question of all. If we are already connected, can we become conscious of the connection itself? Or have we spent our entire lives swimming in an invisible ocean, without ever realizing we were surrounded by it? If there truly is an invisible network connecting human experience, then perhaps the most important discovery is not that it exists. Perhaps the real discovery is that we can become aware of it. Most of us spend our lives believing that every thought we experience originates inside our own minds. We say, "I had an idea. I feel anxious. I want this. I believe that." But pause for a moment and ask yourself something unsettling. How do you know? How do you know which thoughts are genuinely yours? And which ones were quietly inherited from your family, your culture, your social environment, or even the emotional atmosphere surrounding you? Psychologists have long understood that human beings absorb far more information than they consciously realize. From the moment we are born, our brains begin copying patterns, language, facial expressions, beliefs, values, fears, habits. We rarely choose these things. We simply grow into them. In many ways, identity is less like something we build, and more like something we gradually assemble from countless invisible influences. Carl Jung believed that one of the greatest challenges of life was becoming conscious of what had always been unconscious. Until then, we mistake inherited patterns for personal truth. We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, Jung once wrote, but by making the darkness conscious. Perhaps the collective unconscious is not merely a hidden library of ancient symbols. Perhaps it is also a mirror. A mirror that quietly reflects everything humanity has ever feared, loved, created, and destroyed. Every generation leaves psychological fingerprints for the next. Trauma echoes. Wisdom echoes. Compassion echoes. Violence echoes. The invisible network carries everything. This realization changes an important question. Instead of asking, "Are other people influencing me?" we begin asking, "What am I contributing to everyone else?" Because if consciousness is even partially interconnected, then every emotional state becomes more than a private experience. Every act of kindness becomes a signal. Every moment of courage becomes information. Every choice quietly reshapes the emotional environment shared by others. Whether this happens through biology, psychology, culture, or mechanisms science has yet to understand, the responsibility remains the same. You are never affecting only yourself. Think about the people who have changed your life. Perhaps it was a teacher who believed in you, a stranger who smiled when you desperately needed hope, a friend who listened without judgment. None of them probably realized how profoundly they altered your future. Small moments can create enormous consequences. Human history is full of examples. One conversation changes a life. That life changes a family. That family influences a community. That community transforms generations. Invisible networks do not require mystery. Sometimes they require only people. And yet, There remains something deeply fascinating about those moments that seem impossible to explain, the dream that later becomes reality. The feeling that someone needs help. Seconds before the phone rings. The overwhelming certainty that changes the direction of an entire life. Science cannot fully explain every experience. But neither should unexplained experiences automatically become proof of extraordinary claims. The healthiest position is neither blind belief nor automatic dismissal. It is curiosity. Curiosity has always been the birthplace of discovery. Every major scientific revolution began with someone asking a question that sounded unreasonable. What if the Earth moves? What if invisible organisms cause disease? What if time itself is relative? History teaches us humility. Today's mystery sometimes becomes tomorrow's textbook. Perhaps consciousness will follow the same path. Perhaps it won't. Either way, the search itself changes us. Because once you begin observing your own mind carefully, you notice something remarkable. Most thoughts simply appear. You do not hear them approaching. You do not consciously manufacture each sentence before it enters awareness. A thought arrives. Then another. Then another. Meditation researchers have described this phenomenon for decades. The mind behaves less like a machine under complete control, and more like a flowing river. Awareness watches. Thoughts pass. Some disappear. Others capture our attention. The moment you identify with every thought, the river carries you away. But the moment you simply observe, something extraordinary happens. You discover there is a difference between the thinker and the awareness witnessing the thinking. Many contemplative traditions have pointed toward this realization for thousands of years. Modern neuroscience approaches it differently. Brain imaging studies suggest that certain networks associated with self-referential thinking become quieter during deep states of meditation. People often report feeling less separate, less defensive, more connected. This does not prove that consciousness merges into a universal mind. But it does suggest something equally fascinating. The experience of being an isolated self may be more flexible than we normally assume. Perhaps separation is not an absolute fact. Perhaps it is a useful perception. A survival strategy. One that allows individuals to function, while occasionally allowing glimpses beyond itself. Imagine standing beside the ocean. From the shore, you see thousands of individual waves. Each seems independent. Each rises, travels, breaks, disappears. But the ocean never became thousands of separate things. Only the surface changed. Maybe humanity resembles those waves. Different faces. Different names. Different languages. Different stories. Yet beneath every visible difference, the same water moves. The same biological inheritance. The same emotions. The same search for meaning. The same longing to belong. Whether we call it collective consciousness, shared psychology, or simply the human condition, we are connected far more deeply than we often remember, and perhaps remembering that connection is exactly what our divided world needs most. Not because it solves every mystery, not because it proves every spiritual idea, but because it changes how we treat one another. If the stranger standing beside you is not entirely separate from you, then compassion stops being an ideal. It becomes intelligence. If every action contributes something to the emotional atmosphere surrounding humanity, then kindness becomes more than morality. It becomes participation. Every conversation matters. Every decision matters. Every thought you choose to cultivate matters. You may never know whose life changes because you remained patient instead of angry, hopeful instead of cynical, curious instead of fearful. Invisible influence rarely announces itself. It simply moves quietly through the lives of others. So perhaps the greatest mystery is not whether collective consciousness exists. Perhaps the greatest mystery is why we spend so much of our lives pretending we are alone. Tonight, before you fall asleep, pay attention. Notice the thoughts that appear without invitation. Notice the emotions that seem to arrive from nowhere. Notice the strange moments of coincidence. The unexpected feeling of familiarity. The intuition you almost ignore. Do not rush to explain them. Do not rush to believe them either. Simply observe. Because observation has always been the beginning of understanding. And maybe, just maybe, while you are observing your own mind, something far greater is quietly observing through you. Thank you for joining this journey into one of the deepest mysteries of human consciousness. If this video challenged the way you think about your own mind, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced a coincidence that felt too meaningful to ignore, or sensed an unexplained connection with someone you've never met? Your story may become the next piece of a mystery none of us can solve alone. Until next time, keep questioning, keep observing, and never stop exploring the invisible world that may exist between every human mind.